Hey guys, I'm Alex.
And I'm Amber. It's Tuesday, and you know what that means.
Another episode of True Crime and Chill. And listeners, this week's case is a bit of a doozy. I do have to warn you that this case does talk about some triggering subjects and topics, so if that is too much, then we do politely ask you to skip this episode. This case is just another one that I remember reading about, and it just kind of stuck with me, mainly because I couldn't get over the fact that there's an overwhelming amount of probable cause and evidence in this case, but the police just aren't doing anything about it. And that honestly is one of the most frustrating things in this case.
This sounds a lot like the Caitlin Aikens case we did a few weeks ago.
It really does, but it's honestly so much worse because unlike with Caitlin's case where the cops are really just waiting for her stepdad to mess up, they actually have so much more information and possible evidence that points to foul play in this one, but they just won't really do anything about it. This is the story of Alissa Turney. Alissa Turney was born April 3rd, 1984. Her friends said that when she was a teen and as a child, they remember her as being bright, outspoken, very kind and caring, but also a very strong individual. As a teenager, she honestly just loved to listen to music, with some of her favorite bands being Marilyn Manson, Tool, System of a Down, Eminem, and Limp Bizkit. We all understand those kind of bands. According to family and friends, she really had no clue what she wanted to do with her life when she grew up, but who really does at 17?
I did.
One thing they all could agree on was that she did want to be a mom.
Well, right. So she's only like 5 days younger than me. I didn't know what I wanted to do at 17. So
yeah, exactly. Like people ask me, "What'd you want to do at 17?" I don't know. Like,
right.
I don't know. 3 years after Alyssa was born, her mother Barbara met Mike Turney, who actually used to be a deputy for the Maricopa, I think I'm saying that correctly, County Sheriff's Office in Arizona. Because Barbara had been healing from the relationship with Alyssa's dad, Mike was often referred to as her knight in shining armor. Mike had 3 older sons, and Barbara had Alyssa and Alyssa's older brother. So when the two quickly got married, the family became blended. It's actually pretty funny because their neighbors used to joke that they were basically making like a Brady Bunch episode. Mike ended up fully adopting Alyssa, and Barbara and Mike ended up having another daughter, Sarah, in 1988.
Things seem kind of good for the family, it seems.
It did, but as we come to learn with stories like these, they don't always stay happy. Mike ended up leaving his electrical job, and according to Sarah, his daughter, he had been on a roof when a guy holding the ladder slipped, and the ladder shattered his knee. Though she never really remembers him being in a cast, he ended up leaving work and never actually working again. She also states that a lot of it had to do with his mental health. Sarah actually recounts in an article that we're going to link on our page that he was in therapy for a lot of her childhood, so much so that she remembers playing in the lobby a lot as a child. Shortly after Mike lost his job, Barbara ended up being diagnosed with lung cancer. From diagnosis to the time that she died, it was a little under 2 years. Sarah was 4 and Alyssa was about 9 or 10 at the time. Mike ended up having a mental break after she died too. Sarah said that Mike would say that he saw Barbara's ghost when she dropped out of school for a short time and told her, "Your mom is really disappointed that you dropped out of school."
So due to Mike being the legal guardian of Alyssa, I'm assuming she stayed with him after this happened.
She did, and people said that when her mom died, Mike started treating his daughters very differently. He was very strict with Alyssa, and this may have actually caused her to be more rebellious. She smoked a bit of pot, skipped school at some points. Honestly, she was just being a teenager in my mind. Add in the fact that she was probably trying to process the feelings of her mom dying, and you have very normal behaviors for a kid her age. Mm-hmm. I mean, I know when my mom died last year, I actually went through a lot of stages of trying to find ways to grieve and come to terms with it. And I'm 28 years old. I honestly couldn't imagine having to do that at 10.
Yeah. Grief is so... It affects everybody so differently, but yeah, I mean, and when you're 10, I mean, on the upside, kids are very resilient, right? Like,
oh yeah,
it's not that I'm going to say that they bounce back easily because that's not the case. But unfortunately, she's also at an age where this is going to more or less shape a lot of her decisions that will make her be who she is. So.
Exactly. And I mean, when something like that happens, like some people tend to get impulsive. And honestly, I really think that was Alyssa. She just it's not that she didn't think without acting, and she never really did anything to like put herself in danger. Like from all the reports that I read, she drank from a young age and stuff. She did some pot. She was never really into heavy drugs or whatever. She was just probably just trying to find a way to cope with the feelings that she was having to feel because she didn't really know how to deal with them. And honestly, there really weren't a lot of people in her life to help her kind of do that.
So, ironically, when I was 10, so again, I'm like, my birthday is just a few days before hers. We were born
Yeah.
the same year. My grandfather passed away, and I really had trouble processing those feelings because my grandfather was a really big part in my life.
Yeah.
And it was my dad's dad, and it was one of the first times I can actually remember ever seeing my dad cry. And that bothered me, I think, even more than, my grandfather not being around. But, and then I have two brothers, and one of them, the first one was born in 88. So this is weird. Like, it's really lining up for me. Like,
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah.
And neither one of my brothers really remember my grandfather, but I remember a lot of memories of him.
Yeah.
It's, yeah, so this is, I'm totally relating a lot to this. And I, at 17, I was pretty impulsive too. As a teenager, and not knowing what I wanted to do, like, I would take a lot more risks than I think I would have if I actually knew, like, my path. So
Yeah.
I totally get it. Absolutely. And then having to deal with a tragedy like losing your mom at 10, like,
Oh,
none of
yeah.
that sounds completely out of line or abnormal at all.
Oh, yeah. Like I said, I lost my mom last year, and I'm 28 years old, and I'm still trying to find ways of coping with it. Like, for those of you who know me, they would recently know I shaved my head recently. So I now wear a wig, and I go bald sometimes. And you know what? I know
Wigs
people
are
are like,
fun,
"Are you
though.
having a mental breakdown?" I'm like, no, just needed a change.
Yeah.
And so, honestly, like, and just from reading all like the reports and listening to Sarah's podcast, which we'll mention here in a bit, she was dealing with things in her own way, and that's what she was doing. She was trying to figure out her place in the world. And honestly, with all the information that will later come out about Mike and how he treated her and stuff, like, it's understandable why she'd be doing it. It is. So, to most parents, this would actually be an eye opener to maybe be like, hey, maybe we should get you some help. Maybe we should put you in therapy. Maybe we should help you try to process things um, in a reasonable way. But this wasn't the case for Mike. Instead, he actually searched Alyssa's stuff, like, constantly went through her room, went through her bag, like constantly searched her stuff, monitored her calls. Like, their phone was actually bugged for any incoming and outgoing calls. Basically stalked her at work, where he would make sure that's where she was when she left the house. So when she said that she was leaving for work, she used to work at a Jack in the Box. So when she said that she was leaving for work, he would, like, drive to the Jack in the Box, park in the parking lot, and just watch her while she was working.
That seems a little
Yeah.
overboard for someone who wasn't
Like,
getting into, like, a lot of troubles. I mean, was Alyssa
right?
into heavier
Like,
stuff that people didn't know about?
no. And that's the thing, is, like, from all the reports I could read, Sarah, like, even Sarah said, like, Alyssa was never really into all the heavy stuff. And, like, I mean, yeah, she had a boyfriend. She snuck out with him sometimes. Like, she ran away to his house one time and everything. But,
Teenager.
teenager. Exactly. She was a bit wild, but, like, I mean, like, not like wild as in, like, oh, we need to, like, lock down. I know when I was younger, I was a little bit wild, but my dad never actually went to this extent for me.
Mm-mm.
So, where Alyssa's life was very much controlled and watched and, like, monitored constantly, life for Alyssa's sister, Sarah, however, was a huge contrast to it. Where Alyssa was watched constantly, Sarah was able to basically live her life as free as she wanted to. She was able to move her boyfriend into the family home. Mike actually bought her a mini fridge and filled it with beer. She was able to go to parties, stay out late. There is actually in one of the podcast episodes on Sarah's site for Alyssa, Sarah mentions in a phone call to her dad, like, you said that Alyssa was this terrible, like, she acted like this terrible person, but yet, I came home one night with my friend and you offered us our first oxy and had us throwing up the rest of the night. She's like, how is that any different from Alyssa taking your medication?
Oh my goodness. Oh, so a life without rules, basically.
Basically, yeah. She literally got to live, like, how, every teenager dreams to live, basically. Like,
Sure, but the boundaries are also important, and it's kind of interesting. It almost sounds like this was Mike's way of grieving Alyssa's mother's death. Like, almost like he's being overbearing and overwatching because, oh my God, if anything happened to her, you know, her mom would be so mad. But on the other hand, Sarah was her daughter too, and it's almost like
But see, and
he cared
that's,
less.
yeah, and that's really like how he portrayed it to the family with how strict he was with Alyssa was. He was quoted as saying Alyssa needed to be like this and stuff. So when Alyssa vanished, Mike actually gave Sarah full control over the surveillance systems in the house. And when I mean surveillance systems, like there were surveillance systems, like cameras everywhere, including one that was in Alyssa's vent in her room that was used to monitor her when she was out of Mike's sight. So Sarah had actually been quoted saying, as I'm ashamed to say that I was brainwashed by my father, saying, we need to keep an eye on Alyssa, that I didn't realize how weird it was until years later.
Yeah, that honestly sounds like grooming.
It really was. Like, Mike was, in a way, grooming his daughter to look past the hold that he had over Alyssa, to see her sister as someone who needed to have that constant supervision. And Sarah was just such a good child that she didn't need much supervision. Sarah had actually gone on, like I said before, to start a podcast called Voices for Justice. Again, that link will be in on our page and stuff. Honestly, that podcast is super eye-opening for this case. Like, Sarah is on it basically fighting for justice for her sister and trying to find out answers on what happened to her.
Yeah.
In the first episode, she actually has that phone call that she made with her father, and her father is quoted as saying, Alyssa needed to be watched. She was always making bad choices. To which Sarah replies, oh, you mean like smoking pot and drinking just like I was at 13? And honestly, like, it was super shocking to see just how Mike reacted to it, because he started fumbling over his words, coming up with a reason to justify, trying to kind of redirect the conversation back to how he wanted it to go. But he was only really able to say, like, I don't remember that. I just remember you being a good kid.
So basically,
And it's like
he was keeping a stricter eye on Alyssa because there was probably more there than just her needing the supervision.
exactly. Like, honestly, like, if you guys have the time, okay, go listen to this podcast in its entirety, because it is so well put together and gives a lot more insight on our case than what our 1 hour episode will do. It is, I think it's about 20 episodes so far, 25 episodes so far.
Okay.
But literally, when I mean everything, I mean everything. And then she also has a Patreon that has like court documents and all that stuff. So if you want to see that and kind of make your own judgments as well. But I remember listening to this call and I'm just like, holy crap. Like, he literally was trying to like just move it in his direction, but you can tell that Sarah was really having none of his shit because she saw him for what he was.
Yeah.
And she did. So fast forward a few years after all this, after everything was happening, after Barbara had passed away, to May 17th, 2001. Okay, Alyssa's 17. It's the last day of her junior year of high school. And honestly, this girl is just looking forward to finally having summer here so she can hang out with her friends, hang out with her boyfriend, just be a teenager, work, earn money, stuff like that. She actually had plans to go see a friend that night and go to and like hang out with some friends that night and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So the story goes, and this is what Mike has told the police. The story goes, Mike had dropped Alyssa off at the high school that morning as usual and picked her up early for lunch. An argument would follow about Alyssa wanting more independence. According to Mike, he said, as long as you're under my roof, you will follow my rules. He was then quoted as saying, Daddy gets anxious when you're away and I worry. Yeah. That was my face when I read that too. Trust me, I was like, what? So after that, he said that she had stormed off, so he figured that he would see her later that night, and kind of just went about his day. He had said that he went and picked up Sarah and headed home. Sarah, however, states later that her dad was actually late picking her up that day. She didn't think anything of it. She ended up actually walking to a friend's house after they got done at the water park, because their last day of school, they were all at the water park. She called him to say that she was there so that way he could grab her.
Did Mike ever say why he was late picking up Sarah?
Nope. And there have been a few stories over the years that he gave about it. Sarah was quoted that saying that he was frantic when Alyssa wasn't picking up her phone when he actually picked her up, and that her father seemed super distracted about things, like when she got into the car. One of the clues that seemed off to her years later was when she was able to relive that day, the fact that she had smelled like cigarettes when her dad picked her up. She had actually just smoked one a few minutes prior. You know, she was 13 years old. Like, there really wasn't anything normal about a teenager smoking a cigarette. And though Mike was super lenient on a lot of stuff, due to the fact that her mom died of lung cancer, he was very against smoking. So even though he smelled it, she really never got in trouble for that. And she was quoted as saying if it was any other day, he would have like chewed her a new one, basically.
Okay, so I want to stop for a second and just say that when I was 13, I was caught smoking at the bus stop. One of my friends, who I'm thankful now that she told my dad that she saw me smoking at the bus stop. And I got in so much trouble, I wasn't allowed to take the bus anymore after that. Like, my dad made me cut my hair. I wasn't allowed, like, I was monitored about what I was wearing to school. Like, my parents were strict too. Okay, I'm not going to lie. My parents were strict. Obviously, you're hearing this. Like, I got caught smoking, and all I did was took one drag off a cigarette just because, all the cool kids were doing it, right? After that, I wasn't allowed to take the bus. My dad picked me up and dropped me off from school every day, which was not close to the house, right?
Yeah.
And it was because it was middle school. So there's only 2 middle schools, and they're complete opposite sides of town. And I live right in the middle. And then I had, I was monitored about what I was wearing. I had to, I wasn't allowed to have long hair. Like, my dad made me cut my hair. Like, my parents were strict, but it was never this bad. Like, this is, it's really overboard and discerning. Like, he's almost like obsessed with her. But I mean, him not noticing the cigarette smell from Sarah, right? It could also be attributed to the fact that he was focusing on Alyssa being missing and wanted to pick his battles.
Exactly. And and that's what I thought when I first heard this case. That's what I thought. Like, oh, okay, that might be it and everything. But it's just but the thing is, Alyssa frequently did things like this where she just wouldn't answer him and then would come home later. So what really made this time different?
Okay.
So right now
I just want to take a quick minute and sort of re-go over this timeline so far, because I'm feeling a little lost and a little confused. So it's May 17th, 2001, and Alyssa's 17. Yep. So Mike drops her off at school and then goes to pick her up for lunch. She gets upset, basically.
And then never returns back to school.
And didn't go back to school.
He said that she ran away.
And then stopped answering her cell phone, according to Mike, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm just making sure that I'm on the right timeline here. Okay.
Yeah. So he said that
pick up Sarah.
Yeah. So and then he goes to pick up Sarah, but he was late. So I actually believe he didn't pick up Sarah till 7 or 8 p.m. that night.
Instead of right after school like he was supposed to.
Exactly. So actually a lot of theories, and I didn't put this in here just because there was just too much and everything. One of the theories was that he had killed Alyssa and that he had taken her to a location that will later be mentioned. But it's I think it's a 2 or 3 hour round trip thing. But he wouldn't have been able to do it that day because Alyssa was seen that morning at school. What made this time different? So right now, Mike is worried to the point where it was kind of abnormal. He had called Alyssa again and no answer. He had Sarah call Alyssa and again, no answer. He eventually went to the police, but they actually classified her as a runaway since she had left a note.
There was a note? Where?
So in Alyssa's bedroom. Before they went to the police, Mike and Sarah had actually come home to search the house. Sarah ended up checking Alyssa's room to see if anything was out of place and found all the contents of Alyssa's backpack dumped out and actually noticed a note on her nightstand. The note read, "Dad and Sarah, when you dropped me off at school today, I decided I really am going to California. Sarah, you said that you wanted me gone. Now you have it. Dad, I took $300 from you. That's why I saved my money."
That last line doesn't make any sense. If she saved her money, why would she need to take $300 from her dad? Also, was this already planned when she went to school that morning?
See, and that always puzzled me because it seems like it really wasn't. She had a significant amount of money in her bank account, and it was about $1,800 in her bank account, actually. So it seemed like it really wasn't planned. Mike tried to play it off like, oh, it happened after the big fight, that Alyssa finally had enough and ran off. And Sarah wasn't too concerned because Alyssa did have an aunt that lived in California, and Alyssa had been talking about possibly going to live with her.
Was the note ever confirmed to actually be written by Alyssa?
Yep, it was shown to, in fact, to actually be Alyssa's handwriting. It was the same neat handwriting with the loopy big A's. However, Alyssa's room was a mess, and that was something that was really out of ordinary for the girl because she was a very neat person and wouldn't have left her room looking like this. Also, she never took any of her personal belongings. The note also didn't mention the fact that Alyssa had actually had plans, that night to hang out with her friends, and she had all these plans to be able to celebrate her summer.
Seems like this might have been written a while before, but it wasn't actually executed.
Honestly, when I first heard this, I thought that too, because she was already threatening to run away, on top of the fact that the note kind of just stops. That's why I save my money. It doesn't have a please don't look for me, or it doesn't have a I promise I'm fine or something like it. Just stops. That's why I save my money. I mean, I remember making the threat of I'm gonna run away when I was younger and stuff, and I actually had a note like half written and everything, but I was 12, so it's not uncommon at sometimes. Sarah actually said that she didn't worry too much because Alyssa would usually be back. And the police did as well. And the police obviously thought that she'd be back as well, because other than the initial report of Mike going in and saying, hey, I think my daughter is missing, and them going, oh, well, she's just a runaway, they never actually looked into this case at all. No interviews with the family were conducted. No Amber Alert was issued. No investigation into the fact that she still had $1,800 in her bank account that had not been touched, as well as the fact that none of her possessions were gone. If she had $1,800 in her bank account, why would she need to steal $300 from her dad?
Okay, so you're telling me that this girl basically falls off the face of the earth and no one looks for her at all?
Yep. Sarah said that her and her brother were both swabbed for DNA, and that Mike said that he kept putting posters up, but the police were just taking them down. He really had her convinced that no one cared but him. Honestly, if you listen to the phone call between her and her dad, you can really see how Mike is trying to spin the story to how he wants it to be spun. He refuses to do any kind of interviews that'll make him look bad, stuff like that. It's honestly really insane. Mike told everyone about Alyssa for years. Everybody but the police. Like, he would have missing flyers and tell everybody about her and stuff. It honestly really didn't make sense, because Mike had said that he received a call from Alyssa about a week after she vanished around 5 a.m. saying that he really couldn't understand her, but it was her saying, leave me alone, a bunch of muffled stuff, and then she hung up.
Okay. So if he tapped the phone and videoed the house, then there should have been proof of what happened in her bedroom with the backpack and the note and the mess, but also that call.
There should have. There really should have, but there was nothing that was backed up on that call. Sarah eventually started actually realizing her sister was gone, and though she missed her terribly, life did start to move on. Alyssa's case went cold for almost 5 years after she had vanished. In 2006, Thomas Heimer, who was in prison in Florida after being a self-proclaimed serial killer, turned to a guard with a picture of Alyssa ripped from a magazine and said, I killed her, and I'm about to make you famous.
That's ominous.
And it really was. FBI and police actually started looking into it. You see, Heimer was arrested shortly after Alyssa's disappearance in Gray, Georgia, driving the car of a 30-year-old video store employee, Sandra Goodman, the day after she had been strangled, stabbed, and shoved under a bed in a hotel room. He never actually explained why he killed Sandra, but he ended up being sentenced to life in prison. He then started writing letters to law enforcement saying he killed another 21 people, including Alyssa. He said that he had killed her in a hotel room and dismembered her body and dumped her in a landfill. Police eventually went down and interviewed him and realized that he was lying. And Heimer eventually said that, okay, well, maybe it wasn't Alyssa, but it was somebody who looked like her. However, this did push Alyssa's case back into the spotlight.
Well, and that wouldn't make a whole lot of sense for him to be able to do that. If he's all the way in Georgia when he's caught just a month after Alyssa went missing, I don't think he's going across the country back and forth like that. That's a little extreme. But
I mean, you'd be surprised. There are some serial killers who did that. Like, look at Ted Bundy.
Yeah. No, I mean,
Ted Bundy went through...
Basically, he stayed a lot to the West Coast. Like, he didn't go coast to coast very much. I think he went once. I could be wrong. My memory is recalling once. But but basically, it took someone lying about killing her to have the police finally look at the case again.
Mm-hmm. Once the police actually opened up the case, they started realizing that something was up. Right? So this actually ended up letting Alyssa's friends come forward, who the police never interviewed in the first place, come forward and talk about the years of abuse that Mike did to Alyssa, including the mental, emotional abuse, as well as the sexual abuse. There's actually a video from about 4 years before Alyssa went missing where Sarah's recording, and Alyssa goes, Sarah, your dad's a pervert. And when Mike realizes that this is recording, he proceeds to say, and Alyssa is a stupid moron, over and over again. There's also another video where he's recording himself watching Alyssa at her job about 5 months before she vanished, where she comes out and talks to her dad and says that her boss told her it was illegal for him to videotape her. Now, she is seen on camera kind of being like, oh, well, my boss is such a prick and I hate him and blah, blah, blah. But she kind of seemed more like, I'm telling you this to kind of be like, you can't be videotaping me anymore, while also making it seem like I'm on your side. All of these videos can actually be found on the Voices for Justice podcast site, and we will actually link the direct videos on our site, truecrimeandchill.com. So with all these allegations finally coming to light, it is now apparent that Alyssa didn't just up and run away. The police finally start looking at Mike and his motives. At the end of the day, Mike was the only suspect in Alyssa's case. Like, the only suspect. Usually police have, like, one or two persons of interest and a few suspects that they can, like, interview and stuff. But with all the info they were getting, all roads led back to Mike.
So essentially like an open and shut case.
Almost. So here's where it gets a little sketchy. Okay, so I mean, as if it wasn't already sketchy enough.
Right.
The police actually end up looking into all the times that Mike contacted them about Alyssa. For all the times he wanted them to be involved, he never consented to a polygraph or DNA testing. Like I said before, his excuse was, oh, I'm just her stepdad, and the detective said it wouldn't matter anyways. But Sarah actually calls him out on that, on not doing it years later when they ask him again, and he doesn't really have a direct answer for any of that. He just kept trying to, oh, well, it was the police's fault. Oh, well, they never asked me again. Oh, well, this, and this. They eventually actually contacted Sarah on December 11th, 2008, because Sarah had become the middle person for the police and the family. So when they contacted Sarah, they told her that they thought her father was involved with Alyssa's vanishing. Now, in all of this, they never actually say death because they cannot prove that she is dead. Right. They also informed her that they believe Mike had been abusing Alyssa and that Sarah had actually had another sibling from a previous marriage of her dad that she never actually knew about. Unfortunately, Sarah, because of how she was raised and how she was groomed by her father, didn't really believe them at first. Since her father had basically brainwashed and groomed her, she didn't think that he could be capable of that.
Honestly, I don't blame her. It's one thing if he treated her the same as Alyssa, but he didn't. And he really had his daughter convinced that he wasn't this controlling, terrible person.
And he had his entire family convinced that Alyssa was like this bad kid, like this kid who was always getting in trouble, who was prone to run away, who was the one that, like he was quoted in the phone call as saying things like, well, she wasn't that smart and she didn't have that good of a memory. And Sarah would come back and be like, really? Because she had this, and this as achievements and stuff. And then she mentioned how she went to the graduation ceremony for Alyssa's class the next year and that they had given Alyssa her diploma as an honorary diploma and everything because she would have graduated. And, she graduated with high grades and a high GPA. And her dad tried to be like, oh, no, she wasn't going to graduate. They were going to make her take a test and she was going to fail it because she's not smart. And she just doesn't think the way everybody, he honestly tried to have people convinced that Alyssa was just this dumb person who needed to be watched all the time.
So what's really interesting to me about this, me, I like to sit up late at night watching things on Netflix about serial killers and stuff. And there's one I was watching that talked about the kidnapping cases, like the cases where, they kidnapped girls and then kept them for years in the house. Like I'm having trouble remembering the names right now because I didn't think I'd be bringing this up. But there's the guy who kidnapped his daughter in Germany and built a dungeon in his house for her and fathered 7 children with her. That's almost where this almost sounds like it's going to me. Because he was so obsessed with her and watched her all the time, it really wouldn't surprise me if he had kidnapped her and started holding her up somewhere where just he could have her all to himself, which almost sounds to me is exactly what he wanted. Obviously, all of this is speculation just based on the stuff that, I'm hearing from where you got it from, from Sarah's podcast and case notes and stuff. But I just to me, that's what it sounds like. Honestly, it sounds like he took her somewhere, and it wouldn't surprise me if it's possible that she had planned to run away that day. Right. And all of her stuff was thrown out because she dumped out her backpack in a hurry because she was like, this is it. I'm done. It wouldn't matter what her room looks like if she's leaving, right? Even if she's a neat and tidy person, it wouldn't matter what her room looks like. She'd have dumped her backpack, stuffed a couple items of clothes in it, intending to leave. And so when either he says he dropped her off at school, was she seen at school that day at all?
I believe so. I actually do believe that she was seen, I think, for first and second period and stuff.
Okay.
So the first half of the day she was seen, I do believe.
Right. So it's possible that maybe he found the note And that's why he went to go get her for lunch. And then just took her because she had already left the note and set everything up. He's like, oh, today's the day.
Yeah.
Like,
and honestly, I think what blows my mind about this whole thing is how much he convinced his side of the family, just like what kind of person he was. And it's a really good example of, gaslighting and manipulation. Like, if viewers don't really know what that is and what to look for, like this case with Mike Turney, especially with how he speaks to Sarah on that phone call, it's very demanding voice, but also, I love you and I care about you and it hurts me that you think this way and everything. And like, she mentions how she doesn't really talk to her dad's side of the family anymore because they all believe him.
Well, right.
Like, they all do. Like, I
convincing.
think one sibling actually believes her, but she was talking about she wasn't invited to her nephew's birthday party because everybody's like, why are you doing this to your dad? Why are you doing this to your dad? He had his sister call her and be like, you're killing your father and everything. And like it just blows my mind seeing it because, if anybody ever wants like a good, like, case note on like what a gaslighter and a manipulator is,
And what
look
a
at Mike
narcissist
Turney.
looks like. Sorry.
Yeah. And
but
it's literally Mike Turney.
So, that I had, it was a friendship with somebody, and she was very much a narcissist, and she was very into gaslighting.
Called that one out.
But her ex-husband was also very much so, and to the point where he was actually a stronger gaslighter. And our major fallout ended up happening mostly because of things that he put in her head and their kid's head. And she honestly believes I said all these things and did all these things that I was like, okay, first of all, let's skip over all of the bad things you did to me because you're so focused on this piece that makes me such a villain. And you're telling everybody this, trying to gaslight them. Fortunately, they all know me and they know that that's not who I am. But also, like, the fact that he was able to gaslight her, and she is like a master manipulator and gaslighter. So gaslighting is a real actual thing. And it's so easy. Like, if it starts at a young age, like with Sarah, or is like a constant, right? Like, it's honestly something, if you hear it enough times, you believe it. Just like when you tell yourself you're fat or you tell yourself you're ugly, that's you gaslighting yourself. Like, if you say it enough times, not only will you believe it, but everybody else around you will believe it too. That's what gaslighting is. So, yeah.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
And so, honestly, because of all this, I honestly didn't blame Sarah either for not believing the cops at first. Like, this was some life-changing information that this girl had just gotten.
Right.
And, Sarah saw her dad as like, the cool parent, the one who let her make her own life choices. He was actually quoted as saying, there's nothing wrong with being self-made, and you self-made yourself. And she just kind of like, no, I didn't. You did not raise. She was quoted as saying, I wasn't raised by parents. Like, who do I have loyalty to right now?
Right.
Like, I was not raised. You took away my only mother and my sister.
Right. Well, and that's one of the hardest things for a kid to realize is when they realize that their parents are human or they did something that wasn't okay. But I mean, look at, for example, and this is totally fantastical, but like, look at Cinderella, right?
Yeah.
This is in some ways very much like that, where Cinderella, when her father died, her mother's kids were treated like with this utmost respect, and she was shoved to the cinders and was made to clean the house. And the sisters, being gaslit for so many years, saw what their mother was doing and didn't think it was really that wrong. I mean, there was one sister who was kind of like, I don't know that this is okay. But for the most part, like, the sisters were like, well, we're being treated great, so we're not really going to question her because she's such a great mom. And like,
well, and on the flip side too, it wasn't just like Mike's family that he had convinced. Like, this was the guy who like helped out Alyssa's. Oh, like, no, sorry. This is a guy who like helped out Sarah's friends whenever they needed it. He helped out neighbors and people that neither of them even knew. Like, this was a totally different guy that was being shown to the world than what Alyssa saw in her everyday life.
Right. Well,
so he was very good at what he did.
Right. If you look at stories of all those guys that kidnapped those girls for like long term, right? Same thing. All their neighbors were like, he'd come to barbecues.
I never thought that he would do that.
Right. Exactly.
He was always just so quiet. Like, it's always the quiet ones, y'all. Sure. Like, always the quiet ones.
Yeah. I mean, and even like serial killers and everything else, like
Mhm.
they have this double
Like, again,
life.
look at
They
Ted
have
Bundy.
two
Like,
sides.
no, but, like, look at Ted Bundy. Like, no, like, the dude had a fan club when he was on trial for
Oh yeah.
murder.
He had a kid while
Like,
he was in jail.
yeah, yeah. Like, they would let
And
women do conjugal visits with his ass.
even his long-term girlfriend who had a daughter, right? Was like,
Mhm.
wait, th- what? But then she kind of, I mean, she was the one who initially tipped off the cops to begin with. Well, one of
Yeah.
the first ones, besides the girl that escaped. But, you know,
Yep.
same thing. Like everyone was like, no, he's handsome and he's nice. And, you know, yeah, same thing.
Yeah, because
Some
yeah, and
people
I
are
mean
just master manipulators, master gaslighters,
look at
and they're
Jeffrey
usually
Dahmer. Like,
narcissists.
Jeffrey Dahmer literally had
Yeah.
a victim escape, okay? And the victim eventually was stopped by the cops, and Jeffrey just looked at him and went, "Oh, he had too much to drink," and managed to get him back in the house and then kill him with. Like, I'm sitting here like,
Yeah.
so I mean, it's totally plausible. It's totally plausible that
Totally.
Mike had all these people like looking at him in a completely different
Yeah.
way. So eventually, okay, the police end up getting a search warrant,
Mhm.
okay, for the house for any evidence in Alyssa's disappearance. Now, mind you, it is years later. Any kind of DNA evidence might be degraded or whatever, but if there was blood evidence or something, if there was something, it'd be there.
Mhm.
So instead, what they found out blew their minds and probably Sarah's mind once she found out. Inside the house were 26 pipe bombs, a mass amount of guns and illegal silencers, and a manifesto written by Mike about how he wanted to commit a domestic act of terrorism.
What?
When they actually arrested Mike, he was checking his mail. He had a knife on him, 2 guns, 7 loaded magazines, and a 98-page manifesto that he wrote called The Diary of a Madman Martyr.
Uh, huh? What? Like,
Yeah. No, like, it was insane. Like, he had a van that was filled with gasoline. Like, Sarah said that they had that van for years. She and her friends used to smoke weed in that van all the time.
oh my God.
He ended up this whole thing was insane. Like, the manifesto was insane. It went on to say that Mike was disgruntled with his old electrical company and ended up whistleblowing about unsafe working hazards. It also went on to say that the company had kidnapped and murdered Alyssa, burying her in Desert Center, California. And in retaliation, he had killed 2 assassins that were responsible for her murder.
Okay. This is sounding a little like bipolar and schizophrenia, which the bipolar wouldn't surprise me, just because the narcissism and the two sides to his personality, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
This sounds like, again, he's trying to make himself out to be the hero of the story.
Funny enough, he's never actually been diagnosed with any of these. I know that he had depression and anxiety, but that was usually just it. I think he honestly is just a narcissistic personality disorder.
I
And
mean, possibly, but if he has depression, it might be bipolar depression. It just wasn't diagnosed far enough.
yeah, and exactly. But I mean, as of right now, he hasn't really been diagnosed with any of these things. Now, Sarah actually said herself that Desert Center was never of any significance to her or their family. But it might be a place to put down that so that way they can search for a body but never find it. So Mike had actually made a bunch of trips out to California to look for Alyssa, so that's where he may have gotten the idea. Now, with the raid on the house, a bunch of other things were found that were starting to kind of like paint a picture about Alyssa's 17 years in the Turney home.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them were contracts that 16-year-old Alyssa had signed her name saying Mike had never molested her.
Mm.
However, she did tell her friends that it happened a lot. Her boyfriend at the time had actually said that Alyssa told him how Mike had taken her out to the desert and molested her out there. Her teachers and other friends actually backed that story up, as well as other reports said that Alyssa had woken up one night bound and gagged in a chair with Mike on top of her.
How the hell no? Why did nobody report this?
Girl, I don't know, and it's frustrating. It really is because as a teacher you are a mandated reporter.
Yeah.
I don't care if you think it's fake, you are a mandated reporter.
Yes.
But maybe they did, and people looked into it, and Mike just had that way of just kind of, oh no, she doesn't know what she's talking about. Now you see, Mike's nephew David had actually moved in for about 6 months in the late '90s and ended up home by himself trying to watch a videotape titled Dr. Dolittle. thinking it's the movie. Instead of the movie, he found a tape of a woman lying on a sofa with nothing but shorts and a newspaper over her face. And then the video switched to her laying in bed with a newspaper over her face as well. The entire time, Mike was on video just watching her. David said that he was pretty sure it was Alyssa and packed up and literally moved out almost that night. When David had brought that to light, Mike had said that David was a drunk and described it in the statement.
What the hell?
Yeah, so that would be usually how it would go. Like, oh, well, Alyssa was just lying about all this. David was a drunk, so obviously you can't believe a drunk.
I mean, it's possible that he recorded over... so back in the VHS days, it was possible to put... to cover up over certain parts of the VHS that was pre-recorded. Like, he could have had an actual, like, Dr. Dolittle tape and recorded over it, which would be very, not very, it wouldn't be too odd. It would be very...
And then he probably either got rid of the tape or destroyed the tape, so that way it wasn't there.
It'd be very inconspicuous in a lot of ways. First of all, he could have recorded over an existing tape for Dr. Dolittle. Also, it was very normal to record movies off TV and put them on VHS and then just label them. Like, that's how we had Wizard of Oz for years. So
there was more than just that, though. The police actually ended up finding hundreds, and I mean hundreds, of surveillance tapes.
Oh my gosh.
Mostly centered around Alyssa, even capturing her making out with her boyfriend. All phone calls were recorded and saved as well.
But if he was really recording this, shouldn't there be something from the day that she went missing?
Like I said before, all the tapes from that day were actually mysteriously absent. Same thing for the call that she supposedly made a week later. So by now, the police ended up having more than enough to just charge Mike with unlawful possession of a pipe bomb. Yeah. And in June 2010, he was actually sentenced to 10 years in a federal prison. He only did about 7 and was actually released in 2017.
Were they able to get him at all on Alyssa's disappearance or any information?
So again, we're back to no body, no crime. Kind of like with Caitlin's case when I talked to a detective as well. It's not illegal to be a missing person, okay? And unfortunately, since there was no proof in the house that a crime was committed, then they really have nothing to go on. And that's what the police keep telling Sarah is no body, no crime. So the police, after telling Sarah that they would convict her father on charges for Alyssa's disappearance, they ended up telling her that the best bet for information or for evidence that could come forward and convict him was to go to the media. And honestly, that's exactly what Sarah did. In August of 2017, journalist Octavia Zappala ended up starting a 14-episode podcast detailing Alyssa's case. We will also have a link to that on our website as well, because it needs to be heard, honestly. So you'll find all this information on truecrimeandchill.com. So people actually came forward with more evidence about the case because they felt safer talking to Octavia than they did with the police, mainly because the police would have to use their names and stuff. And Octavia really omitted like names, dates, stuff like that. She just used the evidence. They were more afraid that Mike would actually come after them, because if they tell the police this stuff and it's not enough to convict them, and then he finds out that they talked. So in one episode, Octavia actually ended up having a phone call with Mike. If you listen to it, it's kind of disturbing because Mike is very much actually trying to control the conversation, and it was very noticeable. He didn't want to put a story out there that he couldn't control. He even went to as far as to say that the pipe bombs were fireworks.
Right, because the police are going to sentence him to 10 years for fireworks.
Basically. Like, he basically tried to, like, discredit everything that the police were saying about him and everything that everybody was saying about him. Another huge thing is Sarah actually blatantly asks him, "Did you do it?" And she recorded herself saying this. And his answer was basically, "You'll find out all the answers you need on my deathbed."
I mean, that right there is huge. And I mean, is there really nothing the police can do about this?
According to them, they don't have enough credible evidence because until a body is found, they can't prove that a crime has been committed. So now it's 2020, and Sarah is a giant advocate for Alyssa's disappearance and the justice that she deserves.
Yeah.
So much so, in fact, that, like I said before, she doesn't really talk to her dad's side of the family because they don't want to believe that Mike was involved.
It's really sad that he was so able to manipulate things, and everybody thinks that Alyssa just ran away.
It really is. And honestly, I follow Sarah on my actual Twitter and on my TikTok as well. And we follow her on our actual Twitter too. And it's just seeing the hurt and the pain that she is talking about with her sister is just so upsetting because she deserves to know answers. And it's frustrating that the police won't even do anything. Like some of her tweets are just so like appalling because it's like the police are basically telling her, stop harassing us, in a sense. And I'm sitting here like, of course she's going to harass you. Like her father is walking free and knows where what happened to her sister. And you're not doing anything about it.
That's just, it's so tough because I get that it's not illegal to be a missing person, but isn't it illegal to, I don't know, have information on the whereabouts of a missing person potentially that you're responsible for?
Or have a minor sign a contract saying that explicitly saying that you did not molest her.
That
right
alone.
There.
That's
and the fact,
weird.
and I get it. I do. Okay, it's not enough stuff because if they try to pull him in now, he could fight it, get all the charges dropped, and they wouldn't be able to prosecute him again. But the fact that they're like basically telling Sarah it's up to you to find the evidence is quite honestly, excuse my language, bullshit. It is not our job to find out what happened to her. It is the police's job as a whole.
Well,
like they should, and like
if he crossed jurisdictions like that, like if he did something to her in California and that's where she's at, right? He can't be, I mean, then it's California's jurisdiction, not Arizona's jurisdiction, and they don't have enough evidence for them to work together, which is just so sad.
Yeah, and I mean, but you don't know, but like, I mean, he could have done something to her in Arizona and then dumped her body in California.
Right.
But again, we don't know.
Right.
And nobody is saying anything. And so Sarah has just been, and if you listen to these podcasts and stuff, and you just watch Sarah's tweets and stuff, and like she does like 30-second snippets of the case on her TikTok, as well as she talks about other cases and stuff. So with Alyssa's disappearance, she doesn't just focus on Alyssa's disappearance. She is a heavy advocate for a lot of cases like Caitlin Akins and stuff, where there's not a lot of media attention about it anymore. Yeah. I know with Alyssa's case, I never heard of it until I just started digging into cases that don't really get a lot of attention.
Yeah.
And it's just, she's very much a fighter for people who don't have a voice anymore. And that's why she named her podcast. And I feel like that's why she named her podcast, Voices of Justice, because she's a voice for justice and stuff. And she's honestly doing absolutely amazing on it.
That's great.
So as of today, June 9th, 2020, when this episode premieres, Alyssa's case has officially been unsolved for 19 years. Alyssa would have been 36 this year. She probably would have been married, had a few kids of her own, working a job that she loved, and honestly just enjoying spending time with her sister Sarah and watching her grow up as well. Sarah also missed out on the fact that she didn't have an older sister anymore. Alyssa vanished before Sarah even graduated high school. So, and she's quoted as saying she attended Alyssa's graduation to get her honorary diploma alone. And I can't imagine how that would feel. I really can't. This is not how Alyssa's story was supposed to go. It's not. If anybody has any information on Alyssa's case or what happened to her the day she vanished, please contact Sarah Turney on her Twitter at Sarah E. Turney, on her Instagram at Sarah E. Turney as well, or on her Voices for Justice podcast that will also be linked on our page, True Crime and Chill. Or contact the Phoenix, Arizona Police Department with any information you may have.